The void between stars had always been Admiral Zyxthra's domain. In her 4 centuries of service to the galactic hegemony, she had claimed over 300 systems for the glory of the Empire. Her third fleet was a monument to conquest, 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer of reinforced battle steel bristling with weapons that could reduce worlds to ash. The escort vessels that surrounded them like deadly satellites brought her total force to 47 ships, enough firepower to break the back of any resistance. Admiral Zyxthra floated in her command chamber, her elongated form suspended in the biogel that allowed her species to function in zero gravity. 6 compound eyes, each capable of processing different spectrums of light, focused on the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. The tactical projection showed the local star system in perfect detail, a young star, 8 planets, the usual debris of asteroids and comets. And there, hanging in the darkness like a wound in space itself, was the anomaly. "Sensor Officer Creel, report," she commanded, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as nobility among her people. The sound reverberated through the command chamber with the authority of 300 conquered worlds. Officer Creel, a younger member of her species with the quick movements that betrayed his nervousness, manipulated his biomechanical interface with practiced efficiency. His mandibles clicked in the rhythm that indicated deep concentration or anxiety. "Admiral, the vessel is highly unusual," Creel began, his secondary voice box producing the subharmonics of uncertainty. "Initial scans suggest primitive technology by our standards. The propulsion system appears to be based on chemical thrust for maneuvering, with what looks like a crude fusion reactor for primary power. The hull composition reads as simple metallic alloys, iron, titanium, some ceramic composites. Salvage technology." Then, Zyxthra mused, though something in her primary consciousness nagged at her. In her centuries of conquest, she had learned to trust her instincts. This felt different. What else? That's where the readings become problematic. Admiral. Creel's chromatophores shifted to display patterns of confusion. "The mass readings are completely inconsistent with the vessel's apparent size and composition. According to our sensors, that ship should mass approximately 40,000 tons based on its dimensions and materials. And it doesn't? Admiral, it masses over 400,000 tons. The hull appears to be extraordinarily dense, far beyond what those materials should allow. And there are energy signatures throughout the vessel that I cannot identify. Power conduits that don't match any known technology, strange electromagnetic patterns, and Admiral Zyxthra's crest, a fan of iridescent scales that had evolved to display emotion and status, rippled with colors that indicated both confusion and growing interest. Her primary arms, each ending in digits capable of manipulating controls with precision down to the molecular level, gestured dismissively. "Another backwater species that has stumbled across some ancient technology," she decided, though her tactical mind continued to process the inconsistencies. "They've probably cobbled together salvaged equipment from a dozen different civilizations. It explains the mixed readings." She had seen it before, primitive species that had found the ruins of older, more advanced civilizations and tried to incorporate technology they didn't understand into their own crude vessels. They were usually more dangerous than purely primitive species, but never enough to pose a real threat to a hegemony fleet. "Signal them for immediate surrender," she ordered. "If they comply, we'll process them according to standard protocols. If they refuse..." She left the threat unfinished. Her crew had been with her long enough to know what happened to species that refused the hegemony's generous offer of subjugation. "Aye, Admiral," came the response from Communications Officer Vorth, whose specialized organs could broadcast across multiple frequencies and through various forms of space-time distortion. "Establishing contact now." The main viewing screen shimmered and resolved into an image that made several of her bridge crew recoil in surprise. The creature that appeared was clearly sentient, but unlike any species in the hegemony's extensive xenobiological databases. It was bipedal, standing upright in a way that seemed to defy proper body mechanics. Its skin was a pale shade that reminded Zyxthra unpleasantly of the belly of a deep-sea predator, and it had only 2 eyes. primitive optical organs that nonetheless seemed to focus with disturbing intensity. What struck her most, however, was its hair. Short-cropped and the color of burnt vegetation, it seemed almost deliberately styled. In her experience, only the most advanced civilizations bothered with aesthetic modifications to their natural appearance. When the creature spoke, its voice was steady, almost conversational. There was no fear, no awe at the sight of the hegemony fleet. Just a calm professionalism that sent an unexpected chill through the Admiral's nervous system. "This is Captain Marcus Rodriguez of the United Earthship Retribution," the creature said, its primitive vocal cords somehow producing sounds that the universal translator rendered in perfect high hegemony. "You have entered human space without authorization or invitation. State your intentions and your business here." The bridge fell silent. In ZYX-Thera's centuries of experience, first contact with a new species followed predictable patterns. They either cowered in terror at the sight of the hegemony fleet, or they blustered with false bravado that quickly crumbled when faced with superior firepower. This creature, this human, showed neither reaction. ZYX-Thera's laugh filled the command chamber, a sound like metal grinding against stone that her species used to express dominance and amusement. Several of her bridge crew joined in with their own harmonic accompaniments, creating the chorus of superiority that had preceded the conquest of hundreds of worlds. "Human," she said, allowing the full authority of her position to color her voice. "I am Admiral ZYX-Thera of the Third Fleet, servant of the galactic hegemony, conqueror of the Spiral Arm, breaker of the Resistance Coalition. Your primitive vessel will power down its weapons and prepare for boarding. Your crew will surrender immediately, and your world will be incorporated into the hegemony for the glory of the Empire. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet." It was the same speech she had given 300 times before. It had never failed to produce the desired effect. Captain Rodriguez raised one hand, a gesture that in most species indicated submission or a request for mercy. But his expression remained unchanged, and when he spoke, his voice carried a tone that ZYX-Thera had never heard in response to her ultimatum. "Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there, Admiral," he said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "We've heard this. You dare threaten the hegemony?" she demanded, her voice rising to harmonics that could shatter crystal. "We command 1,000 worlds. Our fleets darken the space between stars. Our armies number in the trillions. Your fleets are impressive, I'm sure," Rodriguez replied, his tone returning to that maddening calm. "Your armies are probably very well trained. Your 1,000 worlds must produce incredible resources for war." He leaned forward slightly, and ZYX-Thera realized that every other sound on her bridge had stopped. Her crew was hanging on every word of this impossible conversation. "But you made one mistake, Admiral," the human captain said, and now there was something in his voice that made her biological threat assessment systems activate for the first time in decades. "Just one. But it's going to be the last mistake your empire ever makes. You found us." The silence that followed Captain Rodriguez's final words stretched across the void between the two fleets like a taut wire ready to snap. Admiral Zyxthara floated in her command chamber, her 6 eyes analyzing every pixel of the human captain's image on the main display. In her 4 centuries of military service, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the intentions of other species through their body language, their vocal patterns, their micro-expressions. What she saw in this human disturbed her more than she cared to admit. "Sir," Officer Creel's voice carried a tremor that spoke of genuine uncertainty rather than the routine nervousness of junior officers. "Should we proceed with the deep scan? The human's confidence is unsettling." Creel's biomechanical interface pulsed with amber lights as he monitored the passive sensors, his specialized organs processing electromagnetic signatures, gravitational distortions, and quantum fluctuations that painted a picture of the strange vessel before them. His chromatophores displayed the mottled patterns that indicated deep confusion. Something was fundamentally wrong with what they were seeing. Admiral Zyxthara's multiple eyes narrowed to focusing slits, each one capable of perceiving different aspects of the tactical situation. In her centuries of conquest, she had learned to recognize the subtle difference between bravado and genuine threat. The difference between a species that was bluffing with superior technology they didn't understand and one that was calmly stating facts. Something in Captain Rodriguez's demeanor, the relaxed posture, the steady breathing, the way his eyes never quite left the camera, made her biological threat assessment systems whisper warnings she had not heard in decades. "Proceed with the deep scan," she ordered, her harmonic voice carrying the authority that had brought down empires. "But bring all weapons to ready status. I want firing solutions on that vessel within 30 seconds. "Admiral," interjected Weapons Master HFY, her species equivalent of a tactical officer, "our standard plasma batteries are already charging. Should I prepare the quantum disruptors as well?" "Everything," Zyxthara replied curtly. "I want that ship vaporized the moment I give the command." The hegemony's most advanced sensor array, technology that could analyze the molecular composition of a planet from light years away, turned its full attention to the human battleship. The deep scan penetrated through layers of hull plating, mapped internal structures, analyzed power signatures, and probed for weaknesses that could be exploited. What they found defied every principle of engineering. "Admiral," Creel's voice was barely a whisper now, his vocal cords constricting with what could only be described as primal fear. "You need to see this immediately." The holographic display in the center of the command chamber shifted and expanded, showing a detailed cross-section of the human vessel. What had appeared from the outside to be a single warship was revealed to be something that challenged the very definition of the word ship. "By the void between stars," breathed Weapons Master Tevis, her own chromatophores cycling through colors that indicated shock and disbelief. "Those aren't hull reinforcements." "No," Creel confirmed, his mandibles clicking in the rapid pattern that indicated extreme distress. They're weapons. The entire ship is weapons. Every surface, every internal space, every structural component serves a military function." The 3-dimensional projection rotated slowly, revealing the true horror of human engineering. Layer upon layer of armaments were integrated into the vessel's very bones. Kinetic accelerators that could fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed were built into the hull itself, their magnetic coils doubling as structural supports. Fusion missiles with yields that could crack small moons were stored in honeycomb arrays that also served as armor plating. But it was the energy weapons that truly terrified the hegemony officers. The humans had somehow managed to channel what appeared to be stellar-level energies through crystalline conduits that ran like arteries throughout the ship. The power requirements alone should have melted any known material, yet somehow this vessel not only contained such forces but weaponized them. "The defensive systems," Creel continued, his voice growing stronger as professional curiosity began to overcome his fear, "are beyond anything in our databases. The armor isn't just thick. It's reactive, designed to absorb kinetic impacts and redistribute the energy through superconducting networks. Each impact actually strengthens the surrounding hull sections. Point defense systems dotted every visible surface." "Admiral," Creel's voice carried the tone of someone who was beginning to understand something terrible. I don't think their technology is primitive. I think it's refined, perfected through experience. Every system on that ship has been designed and redesigned, tested in actual combat, improved based on real battlefield data. The implications hit the command bridge like a physical blow. This wasn't salvage technology or lucky archaeological finds. This was the product of a species that had been fighting wars of survival and learning from every engagement. On the main screen, Captain Rodriguez appeared to be consulting with his crew, speaking in low tones to officers whose faces the hegemony couldn't see clearly. But their body language, the crisp efficiency of their movements, the way they responded to orders without hesitation, spoke of a military organization that had been forged in the crucible of serious warfare. When Rodriguez looked back at the camera, his expression had changed subtly. The casual confidence was still there, but now it was underlined by something far more dangerous. It was the look of a predator that had just realized its prey was scanning for weaknesses. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a new edge that made ZYX's threat assessment system scream warnings. "My sensors officer informs me that you've just conducted a deep scan of my ship. In human space, that's considered an act of aggression." His image leaned forward slightly, and for the first time since the conversation began, Admiral ZYXthera felt something she had not experienced in over 2 centuries of conquest. Fear. The word aggression hung in the space between the fleets like a loaded weapon. Admiral ZYXthera felt her biorhythms shift into combat mode, ancient evolutionary responses that had served her species well in their climb to galactic dominance. But for the first time in centuries, those responses were tinged with something uncomfortably close to uncertainty. "Captain Rodriguez," she said, attempting to regain control of a situation that seemed to be slipping through her manipulator digits like stellar plasma. "Surely a reasonable species such as yours can appreciate the necessity of proper intelligence gathering. The hegemony has protocols." "Reasonable." Captain Rodriguez's laugh cut through her words like a plasma cutter through hull plating. But there was no humor in the sound. It was the laugh of someone who had heard that particular word used to justify horrors beyond imagination. "Admiral, let me tell you about reasonable." The human captain's posture shifted slightly, and ZYXthera's enhanced perception caught micro-changes in his facial expression that her xenobiology training identified as markers of deep, carefully controlled anger. Behind him, she could now see other humans moving with the fluid efficiency of a crew that had worked together through life-and-death situations. Their movements were economical, purposeful, the kind of unconscious coordination that only came from shared trauma and mutual dependence. 300 years ago, Rodriguez began, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting a litany that had been burned into his species' collective memory. Humanity was confined to a single star system. We had just developed faster-than-light travel crew jump drives that could barely manage a few light-years at a time. We were peaceful, Admiral. Curious. We reached out to the stars with hope in our hearts and dreams of finding friends among the cosmic community. ZYXthera noticed that the human's hands, primitive appendages that somehow managed to convey remarkable emotional nuance, had clenched into fists. The medical sensors in her command chair detected stress pheromones being released by her own crew as they listened to the human's words. Even across species barriers, there was something in Rodriguez's tone that spoke to fundamental fears. Then we met the Vorth Collective, Rodriguez continued, and now his voice carried the weight of historical tragedy. They were our first contact with galactic civilization. Do you know what they told us, Admiral? They said we were a resource to be optimized. They considered our world suitable for mining, our people adequate for manual labor, our children entertaining. The bridge of the human ship came into clearer focus as Rodriguez gestured to someone off camera. More humans appeared in the background, men and women whose faces bore the kind of scars that spoke of personal combat experience. Their uniforms were practical, designed for function rather than ceremony, and every one of them moved with the controlled alertness of professional warriors. The Vorth Collective had 1,000 ships, Rodriguez said, his words falling like hammer blows. Advanced technology, weapons that could sterilize continents from orbit. They demanded our immediate surrender and informed us that resistance would only make our eventual integration into their labor force more unpleasant. Admiral ZYX-Thera's tactical computers were running probability calculations in the background of her consciousness, trying to correlate the story with known galactic history. The Vorth Collective. She had heard that name before in the deep archives of conquered civilizations. They glassed 3 of our colonies before we even knew what war really was, Rodriguez continued, and something in his tone made ZYX-Thera's primary nervous system spike with adrenaline analogs. 17 million humans, men, women, children, elderly, vaporized in the first hour of what the Vorth called a demonstration of superior force. What happened to the Vorth? You're right, Rodriguez agreed, and his tone sent chills through the alien crew. No species could. But we weren't a species anymore, Master HFY says. We had become something else. Something that the Vortha's vast databases and tactical computers couldn't account for. He paused, letting the implications sink in. We had become survivors. The silence that followed was broken only by the ambient sounds of both ships' life support systems. Finally, Admiral ZYX-Thera found her voice. And after the Vorth? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. Rodriguez's expression shifted to something that might have been sadness if not for the steel underlying it. After the Vorth, Admiral, we swore it would never happen again. Every ship we built, every weapon we forged, every tactical doctrine we developed, every alliance we negotiated, all of it had one purpose: to ensure that humanity would never again be caught defenseless. His gesture encompassed the ship around him, and by extension, the implications of what that ship represented. The Retribution isn't just a battleship, Admiral. She's a promise. A promise written in hardened steel and quantum fire. A promise that anyone who threatens humanity will learn exactly why that was the last mistake their civilization ever made. Admiral, Officer Creel's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. I count 47 human vessels. All of them are showing the same weapon density as the Retribution. Admiral ZYX-Thera stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Her third fleet, pride of the hegemony, consisted of 12 capital ships and their escorts. She had considered it overwhelming force for dealing with a single primitive vessel. Now she faced nearly 50 ships, each one apparently capable of matching her entire fleet. "This is impossible," she muttered. "No species could maintain such a military force. The resource expenditure alone." "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts. "You're making the same mistake everyone makes about humanity. You're thinking like a civilization that wages war occasionally. We don't wage war occasionally." The main screen split to show multiple human ships. Each captain wore the same expression of calm professionalism, but their eyes held the hardness of those who had seen too much combat. "Captain Thompson of the UES Vengeance," Rodriguez continued, "lost her homeworld to the Kethari swarm. Captain Nakamura of the UES Defiance watched the Zephyrian Empire turn his colony into glass. Commander O'Brien of the UES Relentless was there when the hegemony, yes, your hegemony, attacked the human research station at Kepler 442. ZYX-Thra's crest paled. The Kepler 442 incident had been a minor skirmish 3 years ago. A single research station eliminated as a show of force. The hegemony high command had barely recorded it. "You remember that, don't you, Admiral?" Rodriguez's voice had dropped to a whisper. 17 researchers, 3 families, a handful of security personnel. You probably don't even remember ordering it. That was a standard demonstration of hegemony power, ZYX-Thra stammered. The station was in contested space. Those researchers were developing new agricultural techniques to help feed colonies on marginal worlds, Rodriguez interrupted. The families were there because we don't separate our people from their loved ones unless we have to. The security personnel were armed with crowd control weapons because the biggest threat they expected was someone drinking too much at the monthly social gathering. The human captain's image leaned forward. "We remember every name, Admiral. Every face. Every last word they transmitted before your ships silenced them forever." Officer Creel was frantically working at his console. "Admiral, I'm detecting more ships. They're everywhere. You want to know the real secret of human military doctrine?" Captain Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying across the increasingly tense space between the fleets. "It's not our technology, though we've gotten very good at making things that kill efficiently. It's not our tactics, though we've learned from fighting enemies across the galaxy." Admiral ZYX-Thra found herself leaning forward despite her fear. There was something in the human's tone that compelled attention. "The secret is that we don't fight wars to win territory, or resources, or glory," Rodriguez continued. "We fight wars to make sure we never have to fight them again." On her tactical display, ZYX-Thra watched as more human ships continued to materialize. The count had passed 70 now, with no sign of stopping. "When the Korthak Empire invaded human space, we didn't just push them back to their borders," Rodriguez explained. "We followed them home. We dismantled their entire military-industrial complex. We made it impossible for them to ever threaten anyone again. When the Stellar Dominion tried to enslave human colonies, we didn't just free our people. We liberated every species the Dominion had subjugated. We turned their empire into a dozen free worlds that would never again bow to tyranny." Officer Creel's mandibles were chattering uncontrollably now. "Admiral, the energy readings. They're not just weapons. These ships are carrying planet crackers. World enders." "Not just world enders," Rodriguez corrected. "Apparently able to monitor their communications. Fleet killers, empire breakers, civilization stoppers." The human captain's expression softened slightly. "Admiral, I want you to understand something. Humanity doesn't enjoy war. We're not a species of conquerors or destroyers. Most humans would rather be exploring new worlds, creating art, falling in love, raising families. But," and his voice hardened again, "we are very, very good at war. Because every time someone forced us to fight, we learned something new. And we made sure that next time we'd be ready." "Ready for what?" ZYX-Thra whispered. "Ready for anything," Rodriguez replied. "Ready for opponents who outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Ready for weapons we've never seen before. Ready for enemies." The silence that followed Captain Rodriguez's words stretched across the void like a funeral shroud. Admiral ZYX stared at her tactical display with the growing horror of someone watching their entire worldview collapse in real time. The count had stopped at 137 human vessels, but she suspected that was only because the immediate tactical area had reached its optimal deployment capacity. Her enhanced perception caught the subtle energy signatures that suggested additional ships lurking beyond sensor range. Invisible phantoms waiting for orders that might never come, or might come all too soon. "This cannot be real," she whispered to herself, her chromatophores cycling through colors that indicated psychological shock approaching system breakdown. No single species could maintain such a fleet. The logistics alone would require the industrial output of hundreds of worlds. The personnel training, the resource allocation, the sheer mathematical impossibility of it all. Her tactical computer was running continuous assessments, each calculation more terrifying than the last. The Hegemony Third Fleet represented the accumulated military might of 1,000 conquered worlds, the finest technology that 10 millennia of galactic expansion could produce. Against what faced them now, it would last approximately 47 seconds in active combat. "Admiral," Officer Creel's voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts, his biomechanical interface flickering with overload warnings as it tried to process data streams that exceeded its design parameters. "I'm receiving priority communications from Hegemony High Command. They want to know why we haven't reported in according to standard protocol." ZYX multiple eyes focused on the communications console with the desperate intensity of someone grasping for any anchor in a reality that had become fundamentally unstable. How long had they been here? It felt like hours, days, even since first contact with the human vessel. But the chronometer showed only 38 minutes had passed since her fleet had dropped out of hyperspace to investigate what intelligence had classified as a minor territorial incursion. 38 minutes to discover that everything the Hegemony thought it knew about galactic power structures was catastrophically wrong. "Tell them," she began, then stopped, her vocal cords constricting as she tried to formulate words that could possibly convey the magnitude of what they faced. What could she tell them? That humanity had somehow assembled a fleet that made the Third Fleet look like a training squadron? That a species they had dismissed as primitive backwater colonists had turned out to be the most militarized civilization in galactic history? That 3 centuries of hegemony expansion had "Tell them we are conducting extended first contact protocols," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Request additional time for proper assessment." "Captain Rodriguez," she said, turning back to the main screen with the desperate dignity of someone making what might be their final command decision. "What do you want from us?" The human captain's expression remained neutral, but she caught micro-expressions that suggested he was weighing her words with the same careful consideration she might give to defusing an unstable quantum explosive. Behind him, new figures had appeared on the bridge, humans with the bearing and insignia of senior command authority. "What I want, Admiral," Rodriguez replied, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone who had hoped this conversation would end differently, "is for this encounter to conclude with both our fleets returning to their respective territories safely. What I want is for your people to understand that humanity has no interest in conquest or expansion beyond what we require for our own survival and continued prosperity." "But," ZYX prompted, her enhanced perception detecting the subtle vocal patterns that indicated additional conditions were forthcoming. "But I also want you to understand," Rodriguez continued, "that if you choose to escalate this situation, if you call for reinforcements, if you attempt to attack any human vessel or installation, if you return to your superiors with recommendations for military action against human space, the response will be comprehensive, immediate, and final." Behind Rodriguez, a new figure stepped into view. She was older than the captain, with silver hair that spoke of decades of experience and facial scars that told stories of personal combat in ways that no amount of tactical training could simulate. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had commanded fleets through extinction-level conflicts. "Admiral ZYX, the newcomer said, "I'm Fleet Admiral Elena Martinez, overall commander of human military operations in this sector. Captain Rodriguez has been very diplomatic in his explanations, but I think you need to understand the full scope of what you're facing." The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional star map of the local galactic arm. Red indicators marked hegemony territories, blue showed human space, and yellow represented contested or neutral zones. But it was the green indicators that made ZYX-Thera's biorhythms spike with existential terror. Hundreds of them, scattered throughout the map like seeds of destruction waiting to bloom. Right now, Admiral, Martinez continued, you're looking at Response Fleet 7. It's one of 12 such fleets positioned at strategic points throughout human space. Each fleet is capable of sterilizing the star map updated, showing additional indicators in different shades of blue. The scale of what they represented made ZYX-Thera's threat assessment systems overload with warnings. But the response fleets are just the first wave, Martinez explained with the clinical precision of someone discussing industrial production quotas. Behind them are the battle fleets, larger formations, more heavily armed, designed for extended campaigns against peer-level opponents. Behind them are the strategic reserve fleets, held in readiness for threats to Earth itself or scenarios requiring the complete elimination of hostile civilizations. ZYX-Thera felt her respiratory systems slowing as the implications crashed over her like a tsunami of impossibility. How many ships do you have? Fleet Admiral Martinez's smile was sharp enough to cut through reinforced battle steel. Enough, Admiral. But more importantly, we have something your hegemony has never possessed in its 10,000 years of expansion. Absolute unity of purpose. Every human, from Earth to the furthest frontier colony, understands that our survival depends on our strength. There are no political divisions when it comes to defense, no competing factions that might hesitate to act, no bureaucratic delays when human lives are threatened. The older woman's expression hardened into something that made ZYX-Thera's ancient predator recognition instincts scream warnings. When we fight, Admiral, we fight as one species with one goal: the complete elimination of whatever threatened us. The weight of decision pressed down on Admiral ZYX-Thera like the crushing gravity of a neutron star. Around her, the command bridge had fallen into the kind of absolute silence that preceded either victory or annihilation. Her crew, veterans of 3 centuries of successful conquest, watched her with the desperate hope of soldiers who had finally encountered something beyond their ability to defeat through superior firepower and tactical excellence. Admiral ZYX-Thera, Fleet Admiral Martinez said, her voice carrying the inexorable weight of historical inevitability. You have a choice to make. You can return to your superiors and report that humanity is not the easy conquest they assumed we would be. You can recommend that the hegemony redirect its expansion efforts toward targets that won't result in the complete annihilation of everything your civilization has built over the past 10 millennia. Or, ZYX-Thera asked, though every biological instinct her species had evolved for survival was screaming at her that she already knew the answer and desperately didn't want to hear it confirmed. Or you can try to complete your original mission, Captain Rodriguez interjected, his tone carrying the patient explanation of someone discussing elementary mathematics with a child. You can call for reinforcements from Hegemony High Command. You can attempt to overwhelm us with numbers. Turn this into the kind of war your empire specializes in: massive fleets, prolonged campaigns, the systematic subjugation of entire star systems. The tactical display shifted again, but this time it wasn't showing the immediate tactical situation. Instead, it revealed a real-time map of human fleet deployments throughout the galaxy. The scale was so vast that Admiral ZYX-Thera's tactical computer initially refused to process it, displaying error messages as it tried to calculate the resource implications of what it was seeing. There were thousands of contacts, tens of thousands. Each blue dot represented not just a single ship, but entire fleets positioned at strategic points throughout 3 spiral arms. The mathematical impossibility of maintaining such a force structure should have bankrupted any civilization that attempted it, Yet the evidence hung before her eyes with the undeniable weight of observable reality. If you choose the second option, Martinez continued, her voice carrying the clinical precision of someone who had planned for exactly this scenario, what happens next won't be a war in any sense your people would recognize. It will be an extermination campaign. We will not stop with your military forces. We will not negotiate for favorable terms or seek conditional surrender. We will dismantle the hegemony piece by piece, system by system, until it no longer exists as a threat to any free species in the galaxy. Officer Creel looked up from his console with terror-filled eyes, his chromatophores cycling through distress patterns so rapidly they created a strobing effect. Admiral, I'm detecting quantum entanglement communications throughout the human fleet. They're coordinating with hundreds of other fleets across the galaxy. The communication networks are beyond anything in our theoretical models. Real-time coordination across galactic distances. Rodriguez confirmed with the calm satisfaction of someone revealing a particularly elegant solution to a complex problem. Every human ship, every weapon system, every strategic asset linked together in an instantaneous communication network. When we fight, Admiral, we don't fight as individual fleets or isolated commands. We fight as one unified organism with a single nervous system and one overriding imperative: protect humanity. ZYX-Thara felt the crushing weight of decision settling over her like the event horizon of a black hole. A point beyond which no choice could lead to anything but inevitable destruction. The Third Fleet was powerful enough to devastate entire star systems, to reduce worlds to radioactive slag, to break the military resistance of most known civilizations. Against what faced them now, it would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience, swept aside in the opening moments of a conflict that would end with the complete eradication of everything the hegemony had built. What guarantee do I have? She asked desperately, grasping for any thread of hope in the darkness that surrounded her strategic situation. How do I know you won't attack hegemony worlds anyway? How can I trust that peaceful withdrawal will actually result in peace? Because, Martinez replied, her expression softening slightly with what might have been genuine sympathy. Humanity learned long ago that the best way to avoid war is to be so prepared for it that no rational opponent would ever dare to start one. We don't want your territory, Admiral. We don't want your resources, your trade routes, your slave populations, or your subjugated worlds. All we want, Rodriguez added, his voice carrying the weight of a species that had been forced to choose between extinction and transformation, is to be left alone to live our lives in peace, to explore new worlds, to push the boundaries of science and art, to raise our children in safety, to build something better than what we found when we first reached for the stars. His expression hardened into something that made Admiral ZYX-Thara's threat assessment systems activate with maximum urgency. But if someone threatens that peace, Rodriguez continued, if someone forces us to choose between our principles and our survival, we will choose survival every single time. And we will make absolutely certain that the threat never, ever arises again. The silence stretched between the fleets for long moments, filled only by the ambient sounds of life support systems and the quiet clicking of Officer Creel's mandibles as he processed the implications of everything he had witnessed. Finally, Admiral ZYX-Thara made the only decision that logic, survival instinct, and mathematical probability allowed. Third Fleet, she commanded, her voice carrying across the bridge with the authority of someone who had chosen wisdom over pride. Prepare for immediate jump to hyperspace. We are returning to hegemony space. Admiral, Officer Creel whispered, his mandibles chattering with barely controlled fear. High Command will demand a full tactical assessment. They'll want to know why we're retreating without engagement, why we failed to complete the mission. ZYX-Thara looked one last time at the display showing the human fleet, 137 ships that represented just a tiny fraction of humanity's true military capability. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering refined through generations of warfare, each crew trained to a level of efficiency that spoke of a civilization that had chosen survival over everything else. Tell them, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had stared into the abyss and chosen to step back from the edge. That we found something in the darkness between the stars. Something that has been waiting there, watching, preparing for exactly this moment. Tell them that humanity is not a species to be conquered, not a civilization to be subjugated, not a target for expansion. Tell them, she continued as the jump drives began their charging sequence, that some prey becomes the predator, and that predator has been waiting for us all along. As the Third Fleet vanished into hyperspace, Captain Rodriguez turned to his tactical officer with the calm satisfaction of a job well done. "Stand down from combat alert," he ordered, "but maintain long-range tracking on